Hello everybody, my name is Chase Dugas, and welcome to the annual meeting of the National Cattlemen's Association. First off, I'd like to ask for a round of applause for another productive year in providing the American population with beef and dairy products. You've all done such an amazing job in eliminating anything natural from the American diet of beef and dairy, corrupting America's beef and dairy with drugs and antibiotics in order to boost production and put a little bit more money in your pocket. In cattle today, there are several different types of growth hormones administered to them that when consumed by humans can cause abnormal growth and 4 different types of cancer. The conditions cattle live in on feedlots requires the extensive administration of drugs and antibiotics just to keep the animals alive. You may be wondering, what is this kid doing up here talking all this smack? Well, I'm going to go over 2 main points. Firstly, I'll discuss the systems and medications being used in the production of our milk and how it is dangerous. And secondly, I'll go over the drugs and antibiotics being fed to our beef and what conditions these cattle must live in. On to my first point. As I said before, my first topic will be the discussion of the presence of drugs and hormones in the production of our milk and why this is dangerous. Dairy cattle are given growth hormones such as recombinant bovine growth hormone or RGBH in order to boost the production of milk by 20%. The presence of RBGH in the milk results in the production of another growth hormone known as IGH1. IGH1, or insulin growth hormone 1, is a growth hormone that is responsible for cell growth or cell reproduction. The reason why this is important is because it can cause cancerous cell growth or cell reproduction. Because of the growth hormones administered to them and the extensive amount of milk production, dairy cows are very prone to infection. In order to combat this, they are given a large amount of antibiotics which will eventually end up in the milk along with the byproducts of the infection, pus and bacteria. In addition to this, dairy cows are very prone to a condition known as feedlot bloat, or acidosis. This condition is acquired when cattle are given food that is too acidic for the stomach to digest, resulting in bloating and even death, because the stomach gases produced during digestion were not released properly. In order to combat this, farmers administer even more antibiotics to the animals just to keep them alive. And now on to my second and last point. As I said before, my second topic will be about the drugs, hormones, and antibiotics being used in our beef and what conditions the cattle must live in. Just like dairy cows, beef cattle are very prone to acidosis, even more so because of the extra feed being given to them in order to help them gain weight. Farmers must administer a substantial amount of antibiotics and drugs in order to keep the cattle alive and eating, and all these drugs and antibiotics will eventually end up in the meat that is being consumed. Because of the horribly inadequate living conditions that cattle must reside in on feedlots, they are subject to several different diseases, some of which can be transferred through the meat. Diseases such as these are bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or mad cow disease, E. coli, and BVD, or bovine virus diarrhea. In order to combat these, farmers must administer a large amount of antibiotics and drugs to the cattle in order to keep the product edible. Just like dairy cows, beef cattle are administered growth hormones in order to boost production. However, the growth hormones are much more potent and given in a much higher volume because they are for the entirety of the cow and not just the milk. The FDA has conducted research in order to determine whether or not the growth hormones being present in the meat is bad for human consumption, and they have determined that growth hormones are okay to be used to boost production. However, when looking at a packet of meat, there is no indication of drugs, growth hormones, or antibiotics of any sort in the meat, which may lead to the conclusion that the FDA and other science organizations are feeding us false information about drugs in our meat. In conclusion, I'd like to say the cattle industry is able to produce so much more product because of the use of growth hormones and other antibiotics. Because of this, people may be paid off in order to keep it a secret whether or not the drugs and antibiotics being used are bad for human consumption. In creating a more efficient and profitable system, farmers have completely eliminated anything natural from the equation of the cow. Drugs and growth hormones are used to raise the cattle, to keep the cattle healthy, and to increase output of product from the cattle. Even waste production of cattle is affected by the drugs and hormones used. I know you all think you're doing your job providing beef and milk for the American nation, but cutting corners like this, you might as well just leave it be. And striving to find a cheaper and more profitable way to provide cattle-based food products for the American population, you have destroyed anything natural in the cow in the process.